Hello everybody and welcome to another exciting, fun-filled, expeditious episode of Radiorama where I show you how to work on radios. And today we have a Zenith oddball radio. It's a model F615. And it is a it's a 6-tube radio. It's got two 12 BA6s in there, so it's probably a little more sensitive. I don't know how I feel about that design. It's like a big wedge, but it's unusual. Filter magnet antenna. So this is interesting because RCA had some sort of name for their radio when it came out with a ferrite rod, because that's what that is. That's all it is. It's just a magnetic rod versus a wire antenna, wire loop antenna. I don't know what the year is, but it's probably between 1955 and 1963. I'd gather it's probably more towards the 50s. We have these civil defense marks here. It's kind of hard to see there. It says CD. I think it's a little bit earlier. I think it's probably more towards mid-50ish. Don't know if it works. Never worked on this model. I'm going to guess it's probably a PC board design. Zenith did the PC boards for a little bit, and then they backed out and started doing hand-wired chassis again because there were some reliability issues with some of the early PC board designs. This is apparently how you turn it on and off. Go ahead and fire it up. Do not do this with a set that has a transformer in it because you can fire the transformer. Not really much to go wrong in one of these guys. Worst comes down to worse, you might burn out a 1/4 watt resistor in the filament string. But maybe we won't have to worry about that because I don't hear anything anyway, so maybe it's totally dead. Unless that's a volume. It's got audio, at least.
From Green Hill far away. That's all Fred had to say about his exit. We played the
Hayward. Claire Beverly's going to tell us.
We never leave a fallen warrior behind. Ever. Learn more about what we do at woundedwarriorproject.org.
Retired or retiring soon? How much money do you need to live comfortably?
Item. The couple was spotted holding hands and kissing.
It actually works pretty well. I don't really hear any humming either. The Zenith kind of got their act together in the 50s. They had a time period in the late 30s, early 40s where their quality was kind of crap, honestly. And then in the 50s, they really brought the quality back to the point where I'm not really surprised that this still works because they were just using better quality components. And there's about a 75% chance that the components underneath, minus the tubes, are probably original. They were just that good. It's going to be interesting. I've never taken one of these apart. I'm curious. I get a feeling that it's going to be a familiar looking chassis. This is just in a different cabinet. I just worked on another Zenith of about the same era. And the one thing about Zenith is that they would reuse chassis in 10,000 million different cabinets. So when I take it apart, I'll be curious what I find. Calling me surprised, it's actually a metal chassis. So probably someone that knows more details about Zenith's history would be able to chime in here. When did they go back to using a hand-wired chassis? Because this is what that is. Oh well. Something that's interesting here is that there was a sticker on the back of the case that says Harman TV and Radio, Shawana, Wisconsin. Makes me wonder if that was their service sticker. And the reason I'm asking that is because the speaker has a price tag on it of $3.95, and it's a non-Zenith brand. It says Crescent, which is a brand I'm not familiar with at all. So I'm wondering if maybe somehow the original speaker in this, maybe the coil opened? I don't know. Whoever soldered in the new one did a very neat job. And I've seen some strange speaker brands in Zenith radios, but I'm not sure why it says $3.95. You wouldn't have prices on factory parts. So I think that's a replacement. Here's the quote-unquote filter magnet tuning, and it's just a, I love how they've made it look fancier than it really needs to be. They have a cardboard tube, and inside is just a large ferrite rod. That said, it's a pretty long ferrite rod, and it's got 6 tubes, and then you look at the tuning condenser, and it's 3 gang. This thing is super sensitive. Let's see what's going on with this electrolytic. It's probably an 80 and a 50 microfarad capacitor. It's 80 and 40. Makes me wonder if that cap is still good. Because again, there was no hum. It works perfectly. But when I look underneath here, there's definitely some caps that need to be replaced. These orangey looking things, those guys, those need to be replaced. And there's more than one. There's another one over here. That's the 2 chassis grounding cap. That needs to be replaced with a different value and a different type. So this is going to have to come out. This chassis needs to come out. That means this needs to get unbolted, this needs to get desoldered, and then the chassis needs to get pulled so that we can get underneath. Well, I pulled the chassis and it became clear right away that this is actually a true hot chassis set. First thing that I noticed is that the screws that hold the chassis in go through these nylon spacers so they're not touching metal. And also in the front here, the knobs, you can't pull them off, they're secured in place. So that was an extra precautionary thing that Zenith did, so that if, you know, you couldn't pull the knobs off, because I was looking at the, where are they? Here they are. The shafts, they're not isolated from the chassis, so they needed to have that extra level of safety. These shafts are also recessed into the cabinet, so you'd have to try really hard if you managed to yank the knobs off. You'd probably break the knobs first before you got them off. But that makes things a little bit easier, actually. We've got 2 values here of electrolytic capacitor. I'm going to test it. I'm curious what its quality actually is. Okay, well, that's interesting. The first capacitor is supposed to be 40 microfarads, and it's 44 microfarads. And the ESR is really, really low. So I'm going to test the other one. Okay, the first one is supposed to, the other capacitor is supposed to be 80 microfarads, and looks like it's measuring about 90. That's not a big deal. And again, the ESR is really low. Also, I don't see any swelling under here. Like the little shapes that are stamped on the bottom that indicate the values, and the holes behind them are very clean. There's no swelling. I think that electrolytic is probably fine. What do? It's easy enough to replace them, but let me, you know what, I'm going to ask my radio friends about this because they're more knowledgeable than I am. Okay, so I posted that question. I think they're probably going to say you should just probably replace it, which is probably true. There's only 3 other capacitors in this entire set that need to be replaced. They're these paper guys. And they have the values written on this. This is 0.0047 at 400 volts. This says 0.01 at 400 volts. And what are you? This is probably a 0.05. 0.047. And what does that come off of? That's the antenna 2 grounding cap. Let's see, where does the power come in? Power comes in here and then comes around there and goes to that switch. And it's got actually it has a ceramic across the line cap right here, but that's not the right type. We want to make sure it's an X2 Y2 across the line. 0.003. That's a very tiny value. Well, I'm going to replace that with the 0.01 rated across the line capacitor because that's the right thing to do. So we've got a total of 4 capacitors, not excluding the electrolytic capacitor, which I'll get an answer on soon. Okay, so I've replaced all capacitors except the electrolytics. Wasn't that big of a deal. Here's the across the line cap here, this orange guy. What I'm going to do next is clean the pot, because clearly that was a problem. You see these little slots here? You just squirt juice in there. And I'm going to alligator clip it to the speaker and see if it still works. Well, since this is a hot chassis set, I'm going to run it through my isolation transformer. I already have the power turned on. And we'll see if it still works. I have like zero confidence in myself these days. Sometimes I'll start with something and be like, it's in the can. It's totally going to work, and then it doesn't work. So I'm prepared to eat my words. So far I don't hear anything. It's not very promising. I think we have some dirty tube sockets here. Let's see.
No solo agresiva contra la comunidad latina, pero también seeing what we want to see in the Eastern Conference in the playoffs.
Oh, Jake, I mean, it's like J.J. Redick's whisper.
Build on her roots and grow.
With the...
Sounds good. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I think I'm done with electronics for the night. I've actually finished another radio before I started on this one. I'm just going to let it sit here and run for the rest of the evening. First of all, is the electrolytic getting at all warm? Nope, it's still cold. I totally think that electrolytic's fine. Colored it at first for me. Maybe this radio didn't have a lot of service. I don't know. Again, it's weird that they have this speaker that I think is a replacement. But stranger things have happened. Well, the answer I got back was, and I ultimately agree with this, is if this were sold to a collector, they would know what to do if there was a problem. Like if it started to go south and the electrolytics decided to give up the ghost. Most people that get these radios from us are not collectors, and they're not electrically inclined. It's kind of a shame, because I truly feel that the electrolytic is fine, but I'm going to replace both of them with these two new electrolytics and call it a day. Welcome to day 2 of working on the weird Zenith, and I got all the capacitors replaced, and now it's working really well. Had a little discussion with my radio friends last night. It was like, what if a capacitor tests good? Should you leave it in? And they were like, at this age, that age, if it's going to a collector, then that's one thing. They'll know how to deal with it. But if it's going out to the wild, to the general public, and lay people that don't know how to work on electronics, replace it, because it could be decades that this thing is going to be put back into regular service. Meanwhile, what I did is I removed the speaker, because there's a lot of dust bunnies in this complicated design, and it's easier just to remove anything that's critical and take it over the sink and wash it off, and that includes the back. All right, welcome today. I don't remember on the weird Zenith radio, and I have to admit, like a bunch of other exciting projects came in, and like those, I decided to let this sit around for a little bit. It's been about a week since I've worked on it, but one thing I noticed when I took this speaker off, that is definitely a replacement, because someone had to come in here and like cut all of that off so that it would fit flush like that. So that's definitely a replacement. Interesting, but nevertheless it fits and it sounds good, so who cares. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is add the oh so famous and controversial audio input feature. And the first thing that I tend to do in these guys, especially when it's an unfamiliar model, is we want to determine what is the IF signal getting to the volume control. And usually what you want to do is figure out what is the top and the bottom being the ground, and the ground on the volume control is going to chassis. So by default, that means the other side here, which has 3 different connections going to it. We have this capacitor connection and this white cable, which then comes around down to this tube, which then goes to this first IF transformer. So that's a pretty good indicator that this is probably the IF signal. So we'll need to disable that, because what we're going to do is add a little switch wire so that we can turn the radio signal on and off. So when we run audio, it'll be clean. Okay, well, I've cut that wire and we have silence. That's turned up all the way. All right, that's what we want. We want a little bit of hum is okay. So that means we can run a switch wire out the back here and run our audio cable through, which, by the way, I'm running out of cables, so now I have lots of new cables here that I can use, audio cables. I buy those in bulk, 6-foot length cables, and I get 2 cables out of each because they only need about 3 feet. Okay, so we have the quote-unquote internal audio input system installed. I cannot possibly emphasize how important this is. This is a hot chassis set, and you do not want to run audio in directly through that, because one end of it literally is the other side of the AC line. So we're running the audio through this isolation transformer. So this is in front of getting to the volume control. So that means that the user, if they were to touch that metal end, they're not going to get shocked. Very critical. With hot chassis and floaty chassis sets, you need to make sure and do this. So what we do is we have our right and left channels run through a set of 33 ohm resistors, and then our negative of the audio goes to the other side, and then our primary side of the transformer goes to the other side of the volume control here. And then we'll have this switch wire coming out the back. That'll be a switch, then we can restore radio. We don't need to have it that long, but whatever. So I think it's about time to start thinking about reassembling this, and then we'll give it a try, see if it still works, which it hopefully does.
Spring is here, a suppering is here. Life is Skittles and life is beer. I think the loveliest time of the year is the spring. I do, don't you? Of course you do. But there's one thing that
Very nice sounding radio. I have to admit I had a hard time reassembling this for various reasons. One of those stupid things where, like, for example, I cut up my hand pretty good. But it's worth it, because this is a very bizarre looking radio. It's like a Wedge. It's got a good sound quality too.
when they see us coming, the birdies all try and hide. But they still go for peanuts when coated with cyanide. The sun's shining bright, everything seems alright when we're poisoning pigeons in the park.
I agree with that statement. I hate pigeons. They crap all over our cars. They're stupid. They bob their little heads. So I have no problem with that. Anyway, I know this is kind of a weird episode, and if you guys stuck around, I really appreciate it. I feel like I'm just usually talking to myself in these videos, but until the next time a radio comes across my workbench, I'll see you guys next time. See you later. Bye, and thanks so much for watching.